Hey there. I am wanting to share my story with you, the one that I haven't been able to share. It's been a really unique few years for me, and I have not been able to share everything that's been going on with me. And now that I'm in a position where I can share it, I really want to because I feel as though there's a pretty good chance that many of you who connect in with me will really resonate with what has been going on in my world. So you might know that I've had a couple of head injuries in the last few years. When we moved up to Yorkshire, we'd lived there in the earlier part of our marriage, and this was in England and in the north of the country in Yorkshire. And we'd lived up there when we first got married, and we moved back up there after my husband got a job about 6 years ago. And when we moved up there, I got a really bad head cold, and then I ended up getting a head injury because something fell on me while we were unpacking. It was so sad. It's just one of those accidents that happen. I was just really, I really felt it immediately because it was quite heavy and it dropped right on top of my head, sprained my neck, and I was really just basically sitting in a dark room for a few months. And you may know this part of the story, but there's a whole part of this that has nothing to do with medical that I've never really shared, and with good reason, really. But so I was going through some tricky stuff just physically. My body just totally changed because my brain was just struggling. So I wasn't writing emails hardly at all for months, and sat in a dark room for a few months and didn't do anything. And then my team thankfully tried to help and make sure that everything was working so that we could still serve you while I rested. And then the process of recovery took longer and longer than expected. And years later, I was still struggling to do some really key stuff, but there was some some connection here that wasn't really making sense. Everything wasn't adding up. And so we tried to do the best we could with those things, get the care that I needed, and look after myself. But ultimately, I was still having really bad problems with balance and with actually cognitively processing certain things. It just wasn't happening. And I had a whole section of memory that was just missing. I couldn't even remember certain holidays that my husband and I had been on. There was like a whole period of time for a couple of years that was just kind of missing. And I would look at pictures and it just meant nothing to me. And it was a really frustrating and kind of real life situation that I was in the middle of. And while that was going on, a few years later, we were still kind of grappling with the cognitive part of this and the balance part of it. Not being able to put on my socks while standing because I'll just fall straight over. Have to, I can't stand on one foot. Things like that that I had taken for granted all my life just were gone. And so I was grappling with those things. And then I ended up with a second head injury, which was a couple years later. And I know you kind of know some of this potentially if you've been connecting in with what's been going on with me, but it will give you some context for some of the stuff I want to share with you that you may not know. So when I was in the process of recovering, I was walking somewhere and I ended up with this really, it was just kind of a freak accident, basically. I tripped on a curb that had been broken. It had been unmanaged. Nobody had fixed it. And my shoe caught on it. The rubber of my shoe caught on it, and I went flying. And because my balance wasn't that great, I couldn't catch myself. And so my forehead just slammed into the pavement. I will spare you the photos. It was a real blackberry right on the forehead. And it really just made my body go berserk. I ended up in the hospital even more. I'd already been going through some difficulty, and this just kind of made things worse. But in the midst of that, along the way, a couple, well, 3, nearly 4 years ago, just before all of this happened with the second head injury, my husband and I felt led to purchase our first home. We'd rented for years, and we were in family accommodation and different things. And then we actually were going to purchase our first home, and we felt really at peace about the decision. But for some reason, everything about it was difficult. And we just were trying to be led by the grace of God and by his peace and his favor. And so we just stepped forward and we purchased this house. It was a new build house, and it was a real blessing for us to be able to purchase it. But we really felt the stress of it. And now I have moved across state lines. I've moved across the country multiple times. I've moved internationally. I've done some really stressful moves. They say that moving house down the street is considered one of the largest stresses of life, and I've had some really strong moves that have been real stressful in my lifetime, selling everything and moving abroad. But I actually have never experienced a move that was so stressful. There was something about it that just was super stressful. And in the lead up to actually purchasing the home, I ended up in the back of an ambulance with everybody thinking that I was having a heart attack, and blue light ambulance rushing me to the hospital, all very dramatic. And come to find out, my body had a spasm attack where all of the muscles from head to toe were spasming without stopping. And it had gotten to a point where actually there was so much spasm attack happening that it was pulling my heartbeat out of sync. And so it was mimicking a heart attack, when actually what was happening was that my whole body was just screaming for rest. And there was really nothing that I could do about it. It was just going crazy. But that was the first spasm attack that I had. And it started a 2-year battle of spasm attacks that landed me in the hospital repeatedly, as people just kept speculating, maybe something is wrong with your heart. Maybe, well, let's tape your heart. Let's do this, let's do that. And investigations and trying to figure out, why is your body spasming? Because eventually my body just learned the behavior that at the moment's notice of something being a little different, it would just start a 2-week episode of so many spasms that I was just in so much pain that I had to really layer every level of support to try and help me recover from it. And I couldn't do anything, and the migraines were unreal, and the drama. So I'm sharing this with you, not because I want to share heavy stuff. I just want to be real with you, share my story with you. In the midst of all of this going on, we purchased this home, and we got the home. And it was a real blessing to own our own home, no doubt. However, what I haven't ever really told people, because we just weren't at liberty to, is that they actually sold us a lemon. The house was not fully built. It wasn't fully complete. And because I had just gotten out of the hospital, we were in no position to contest that they needed to finish a few things that we were noticing straight away. And it wasn't until we got into the house that we started to notice that there was even further issues than what had met the eye at the beginning. And so we were helplessly needing to just move in and deal with it once we got in. And once we got in and started to look around, we then started a 3-year and 7-month battle of being in this home and trying to get the warranty to the builder to honor the warranty, and to actually put right the things in the house that had gone wrong. And these were not small things. Like, yes, it wasn't finished being painted, and they'd left a really terrible job with the plaster work, and there was cosmetic things like this, but there were also some really scary things that were going on with the house. Like, you could hear it falling and cracking inside the walls. Material was just breaking away and falling inside the house. So you could hear that, which we, because my grandfather and my father were builders, I do know a lot about how houses are built, and I didn't expect everything to be perfect, but we found nearly 300 things that were wrong with the house that needed to be put right, including some really big things, like all of the three-story house. It's a smaller square footage, but 3 stories, and the all of the flights of stairs in that 3-story property all had to be replaced because some of the steps were actually outside of building regulations, so they were too tall. So what would happen is you'd actually step onto it and you'd trip because you'd calculate in your brain how high to step, and it would be wrong, and so you'd actually just miss the step and fly into the staircase. And this was actually an issue for anybody who visited us. We had to warn them to be careful on the stairs. You have to really pay attention when you're walking around, which admittedly was very scary for me when I already had balance issues, and stairs were difficult for me before even moving into this house, and they were escalated living in it. And there were a number of things that were wrong with the house, that, the plaster cracking away and things like that were cosmetic that could be fit right. But then there were other things that were really wrong with it, like this. And we just struggled to get the builders to actually put it right. And it wasn't just a once or twice thing. It was not like a, fill some paperwork out and then we'll try and put this right. It was something where I ended up spending hours each week for 3 years trying to get it put right so that we could actually even sell the house, that we could live in it safely. It didn't feel like a safe habitation. It was a constant feeling of, are the walls going to stay up properly? The wind is not drafting in around the windows, it's blowing in. And, everything was just a little scary, right? Excuse me. So it was a stressful situation to be in and out of the hospital and then feeling unsafe at home. But on top of it all, another aspect of it was going on that we just didn't know about, which was that the actual neighborhood itself, we had only moved 5 minutes down the road when we moved into the house, so we were well aware of the neighborhood. But we didn't know, even though we'd done the research, that people were deliberately not reporting crime in that particular neighborhood because they didn't want to be in line for retaliation, or they just couldn't be bothered because it happened so often that it was just stressful to pay attention to it. But we lived right next to a park, and people would set it on fire, like literally set the park on fire, set the trees on fire. We'd have to call the police out, or the fire department, to try and catch it before it went out of control. There would be, drug deals and kidnappings and car theft and, things. And they're not all right in that area and whatnot, but some of it was. And it was at a point for me, I just didn't feel safe because I was not at my best to walk outside by myself. And so we lived in an environment that, although on paper is just kind of an average neighborhood, and the house is nice, and we did feel that it was right for us to sell the house. There was no grace on it whatsoever. We felt such a lack of grace to be there, and we really felt like it was time for us to move on. And so my husband actually got a new job, and we went private with my healthcare because, as you might know, in England we have public healthcare, and they were really grappling with how to look after me. And so we moved to another place, got some private healthcare, and in a matter of months they had worked out how to look after me and got me some private treatment, and finished that whole season, wrapped it up in a matter of months, got me off of all the stuff that was needed to support me, everything, and just completely moved me into another season. So I've been given a clean bill of health, thankfully. I've had some really weird reactions to things this year and been quite unwell, but ultimately I've been given a complete bill of health, and am able to just get on with it, which I am so grateful to be able to just live life and try to build up stamina and energy, and get my energy back, and lose weight and sleep less, and all the things that I couldn't do. I'm thrilled to be able to start to do those things and live a more active life like I enjoy. And in the process of all of that good news, my husband got a new job, allowing him to work remotely, and so we then felt that it was the right thing for us to move, because we'd like to be close to friends and family here in the Southwest. And so we put our house on the market, and we were still battling with the warranty and all of that, but we had a buyer come forward who was really keen to purchase the house and was happy to negotiate with the builders and the warranty providers to wrap up those matters. And so we were able to sell it without them ever managing to put right the things that were wrong, but we did actually do that well, and someone else is very pleased to have the home now, and we are very pleased to move on from that season. And so we sold it, but we didn't have anywhere to live because the rental market is absolutely crazy, and we didn't want to purchase at this time with the market like it is. It didn't make sense for us. So we thankfully were able to put some in savings from the sale and move on. And so we put everything in storage, went to stay with the in-laws, and they were gracious enough to let us stay with them for a few weeks, and we've found ourselves a beautiful home. So this is it. You can see I'm in boxes and here in my new studio, and I'll show you around once I get everything set up, and it could take me a bit because I've got less shelving. This the built-in unit is already here, so I'm trying to negotiate all of this. And I actually have our piano in here as well. My family piano is in my studio rather than in our main living space this time. So I've got a little bit less wall space than I would typically have in a room this size. But I'm really, really excited, and I feel so grateful. And I wanted to share this with you because I've been through a really unique season of high stress, of not feeling safe, not feeling empowered to move on from where we were at, because we couldn't really get out of the house until we'd reached a certain point of negotiation. And thankfully we did, and that was enough to be able to move on and do that ethically and in the best interest of someone else, because we don't want to send that house off to somebody without it being a good deal for them as well. And so we needed my health recovery. We needed my husband's job to change. We needed our home to change. We needed our location to change. We literally needed everything to change. And we decided, let's do it all at once. Let's just rip the band-aid off. Here in England, rip the plaster off, right? Let's just get it done and let's move on to another season. And so we trusted that God was just going to sort this out and get everything in storage. And then we're looking and looking. And then God just led us to an absolutely beautiful home that was recently renovated by a wonderful landlords that are great people. And the home overlooks the seaside. We're up on the hills. We're in the county Devon, and we're on a seaside town, and we're overlooking the harbor, and we can actually see down into the valley to the beach, and then we can see the headland of harbors, 20 minutes from us drive. We can see across the way and see for absolutely miles, and on a clear day you can just see so much. And that's out the back, and out the side you can see countryside, and out this side you can see a completely different bay of the ocean, because all of this is ocean. And so we've just got these beautiful bifold doors, and the house itself is just absolutely stylish and stunning, with a beautiful bathtub and lovely space in all the rooms, and lots of room in the kitchen, which, if you know me, I love cooking and baking, and so I'm thrilled to have a kitchen that's a bit bigger so that I can cook to my heart's content. And I feel like I want to give you some hope that in the midst of such a difficult season, where I definitely cried many tears that I could not possibly have collected, but I know that God collected those tears and wept with me through that season. That was a really tough situation, but in a matter of weeks, all of these things have come to a close. We've moved on, and my husband's in a great job. We have a beautiful home that we feel so blessed to live in, and I just keep staring out the window at that view, and it's stunning at night. You can see all the lights in the valley, and in the day you can see all of the waves and the sunrise, and it kind of moves across the whole day, so you don't really see the sun or rise or set per se at this time of year, but you just see the sun all day, and there's just so much light. So restful, and I almost feel like we've moved into a sabbatical season, like a season of rest. And I wanted to talk to you about this because as much as we've been through some really tricky things, and my husband's been an amazing carer of me, and with he's dealt with all of the stresses of, is my wife going to live in the ambulance, and, all this drama of caring for someone who's unwell, and then moving on to trying to negotiate the sale of a house that isn't complete. And it turned out just so well. God blessed us to help us move on, and bless somebody who is really excited to move into the home and is happy with where things are at and where they can take it. And so it was a win for everyone, and it was a win for me. I just feel such a relief, because I don't feel scared that I'm safe at home by myself. I don't have to worry about it. I live in a place that feels so safe. You probably wouldn't have to lock your doors. Of course we do, but we probably wouldn't have to. It's just so safe and so restful and quiet. And I am so thankful that God has moved us from such a difficult season into such a beautiful season. And I just want to give you hope and say, if you are in the midst of a really difficult season, if my story resonates with you and you think, wow, that's really tough, I don't want you to connect with my pain. I want you to connect with my victory. I want to ask you to do that. I know years ago I had a really bad health condition, and I was bedridden for a number of years, and then I was dramatically healed. And this was long before I had those head injuries. And when I shared that story, a lot of you really connected with the pain of my story, but you really struggled to connect with the victory. And what happened is you wanted to talk about the difficulty, but you didn't want to actually move towards a solution. And so I want to, be frank with you and say, I had to play my part. I had to work so hard to get well. And this wasn't a dramatic healing this time. I had a whole panel of medical professionals making meetings to talk about how to look after me, and concocting plans to look after me in ways that were so complex and at highest levels of profession. And I've seen God do dramatic healing in my body, and I've also seen him provide the care of professionals to look after me and help me move forward, and give me the wisdom and the insight and the knowledge on how to care for my body so that I can move forward as well. And so I've had to do my part. I've also had to do the negotiations to sell our house and actually physically pack our house and move out. And, we've had to physically engage with our moving on into another season. And so I want to, provide you some hope that things do change. When things are hard, there is a place where we can go from glory to glory. We can move on to greater things. God does have wonderful things for us. He is not looking for us to suffer for the sake of it. Yes, it's true that suffering is something that we should do with grace, and it should be positive that we work out our salvation from a place of recognizing that we're not entitled to anything. However, having said that, I really think that God benefits when our life is in a place of victory that brings people hope that, I would like to be a Christian if that's what it means to have some victory. Now, it doesn't mean I'm speaking a prosperity gospel or that I think we should have all the things and live a plush life. What I am saying is that we shouldn't just suffer and think that this is all that God had for us. In fact, we should be looking for ways to live in victory and really let people see that victory is something, our Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Like, God is the wealthiest of them all. He's got gold streets in heaven. And while there is much pain and suffering that can occur here in this life, we ought to be living from a place of victory. And we should strive towards a place of victory. And so I want to encourage you to step out and have a close look at what's going on in your world. If there's something that is causing you angst and grief, if you're really, butting heads with something in your life and you're thinking, this isn't going well, don't blame yourself. Don't get stuck looking at yourself and thinking, you could do better than this. Don't beat yourself up. Instead, just say, oh, God, I need a different thing going on here. I can't do this anymore. This doesn't work for me. I don't have any grace on this. And this is years ago, somebody actually said to me, you should follow the favor, follow the grace of God. If the grace of God is somewhere for you, follow it. When it lifts, move on with it. And don't stay longer than the grace of God has stayed. Because when the grace of God moves on, it is time to move on. And I have benefited from that advice many times in my life. And in this, we recognized that the grace of God had lifted and it was time to sell up and move on. And so I would encourage you to do the same. It's been really hard. I honestly wasn't sure if I could do this video without a few tears. It's been really painful. But I have maintained two things. I'm responsible for the life that I have. Things don't happen to me, I happen to it. And so it's my job to step into whatever it is that God has called me to, because I'm meant to partner with God for the advancement of his kingdom on earth. And so my job isn't to just wait for life to happen to me. It's for me to say, okay, I want to partner with God to see his kingdom advanced. And that doesn't happen if I'm just sick and stressed and living in an environment that makes me feel unsafe. So what can I do to make some changes? It might mean that I have to get more qualifications or change up everything that I'm doing. There were some many steps over this past year that took us to get to this point, but I am so grateful to be in a position where we have just now celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary, and we feel like we've, escaped from a season of difficulty. And God has met us when we stepped out. He met us halfway. And he's good at that. When we step forward and say, we'll do our part, then he comes along and he adds his grace to that to make it happen. And here we are, having gone from glory to glory. We are in a really beautiful place that is so restful. And I am so, so grateful for the goodness of God. And yet my responsibility now is to rest up and keep moving forward. And so I'm going to live from a place of rest. I'm going to live from that place of internal rest and external rest, of creating an environment for myself where I can thrive. And I wasn't in an environment where I could thrive. And so we worked for some years to get out of it. And I'm thankful to now be in a position where we've taken that action and it's paying off. And so I want to encourage you to do the same with me. If my story resonates with you, would you share your story with me? Talk to me. Tell me what's been going on in your world. How can I pray for you? You are not a victim of your circumstances unless you allow yourself to be. So I said there were two things. One is that I need to be responsible to take action and get engaged. And the other thing is that God is always good. It doesn't matter what I'm going through. His goodness doesn't change with my times and what's going on in my world. He doesn't become less good because I'm having a bad day. In fact, his goodness is constant. He stays good. And so I don't have to kind of twist in my mind that he is good even though he wants bad things for me. I just have to know that if it ain't good, it ain't God. God is good. What he's doing is good. And so my prayer for you is that you know the goodness of God in the land of the living, in this life, that you step into the goodness of God and that you see it in the difficulties when we get to have that sacrifice of praise, because it's difficult, it's tricky. We can praise him for being good in spite of the difficult things we're facing. And then we can praise him for the goodness that he pours out on us when it's in the times of good. And so I am grateful, and I will have a little bit of a tricky one here as I get going. I'm coming away from a really stressful season, and so I'm probably going to have to just ease my way into this. I think I've done fairly well to keep up with things in ministry over the past few years, but I've tried to really pace myself because I couldn't really expect a lot out of myself. And I think I'm going to have to need a little bit of grace from yourselves and from myself to be able to pace my way through what is coming and what's in this next phase, because I have just been, for lack of a better way to put it, just kind of stressed out of my mind for a really long time. And so I'm going to rest up as best as I can and take in the views and the fresh sea air and just soak it all in while keeping the kind of pace that I have been, and just continue to keep adding more as I grow and get to a place where I can handle that. And I'm really excited. I have so much vision and so much uh, excitement for what is to come. I've been really dreaming about this for some months now, and really excited that my capacity is improving because I'm not trying to work on the warranty of a house that we purchased. I am, not trying to grapple with how to make sure the house is safe. Like, every day taking all of our keys and everything and putting them in the middle of the house so that nobody can steal them from the house in the middle of the night while we're sleeping, because that was happening to our neighbors. And, I don't have to think about all of the ways to keep us safe and to make sure that I'm taking everything necessary to look after my health and, to do certain things. I can just start to live life proactively. And so a lot is changing for me, and I've got to give myself capacity for that, but it's all very good and very exciting. So I'm going to set up this studio, and I'm also setting up internet. I'm using a mobile internet right now that has almost no speed to speak of, and in a couple of weeks, on the 11th of November, I can hardly wait for it to come. We will have good internet, and I will be able to get more involved and really engage with people, because at the moment, I can barely do a post. So it's going to take an excruciating amount of time to get this video to upload for you, but I wanted to share it with you and let you know what's going on in my world and why I've been quiet. A part of why I've been quiet is because we've been moving and looking for houses and doing all of that, putting it into storage, then taking it out of storage, then setting it up and all of those things. But we've also been without internet. So once that gets settled, I am super excited for what is to come, and just really want to encourage you to go with me into the victory of this next season. I really do believe that the season is shifting for a lot of people, and while there is the fear and the scare of what's going on in our economy and in politics and in the world around us, is really grappling with many things, and it's having an impact on people's jobs and their livelihoods and their heating, and all the things around us feel very temporal and scary. But I do believe that God is giving victory to his people in this season, and not just to me, but to many. So if you're going through difficulty, step towards breakthrough. And if you don't know what that looks like, stay connected with me. I'll share more. I'll connect with you on this, and let's grow more towards the things of God and what he has for us and how we can step into all that he has for us. I do not want to be a half-hearted Christian. I don't want you to be one. I want us all to advance the kingdom of God by first advancing it inside, so that we can advance it out here in the world around us. I love you all very much, and I am so grateful to be in this life journey with you, and I look forward to what God has in store for us together in this next season. Stay plugged in. Please talk to me and connect with me. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't, so that we can stay connected, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Take care, and know that you are so, so, so loved. Bye for now.